The judge smiled before I even opened my mouth. Not a warm smile. The kind that tells you the verdict is already written and everything that follows is just paperwork. My father sat in the second row with his arm draped casually along the back of the bench. Comfortable. Like a man who had come to confirm something, not argue it. His attorney stood at the opposing table, organizing a stack of printed photographs with the careful hands of someone who knew exactly what they were about to do. On paper, the case was simple. My grandfather, Colonel James Whitaker, retired United States Army, had passed away 6 months earlier. His estate totaled just over $11 million. Real estate, investment accounts, municipal bonds. Nothing flashy. Just decades of discipline. He left the majority to me, his only granddaughter. My father received a smaller portion. That imbalance was what brought us here. They weren't disputing the will. They were disputing me. Your Honor, my father's attorney began, we are not questioning the existence of the will. We are questioning whether the respondent possesses the financial judgment required to manage an estate of this size. He turned toward the monitor beside the bench. With the court's permission, we'd like to present visual evidence. The screen came to life. Me, behind a cafe counter. Navy apron. Hair tied back. Holding 2 coffee mugs. A timestamp in the corner. Late morning. Tuesday. The second image. Me wiping down a table. The third, leaning over a register. The fourth, carrying a tray to a customer by the window. 3 weeks of photographs. Different days. Same story. These images, the attorney continued, demonstrate regular employment in a low-wage service position. Managing an estate valued at $11 million requires financial sophistication and long-term planning capability. He paused just long enough for the implication to land. Attributes not typically associated with entry-level service work. The judge leaned forward and looked at me the way people look at case studies. Miss Whitaker, he said, are you currently employed at this establishment? Yes, Your Honor. A ripple moved through the gallery. Quiet but there. And how long have you worked there? Approximately 3 weeks. He nodded slowly. Managing millions, he said, almost conversationally, is a bit different from serving coffee. A few people laughed. Not loudly. Just enough to register. My father didn't look at me. He was watching the judge, relaxed, certain, the way someone looks when they believe the room has already decided. And it had. Almost. Your Honor, the attorney continued, we are requesting the court appoint a temporary administrator for the estate pending further review. Given the respondent's current employment status, there is reasonable concern regarding potential mismanagement. The judge turned back to me. Miss Whitaker, do you have legal representation today? I am representing myself, Your Honor. Another shift. Sharper this time. That is your right, he replied. Though I would strongly advise obtaining counsel given the complexity of the matter. I nodded once. Then I reached down and picked up the folder I had brought with me. It wasn't thick. Didn't need to be. Your Honor, may I respond to the court's concerns regarding my capacity? The room quieted. Proceed. I stepped forward just enough. The monitor still showed me mid-motion, caught in a moment that now meant more than it should. For a second I saw my grandfather standing in the doorway of his study, arms crossed, watching. He never stepped in early. He always waited to see whether you would. I looked back at the judge. My current employment, I said, is temporary. My father's attorney shifted, ready. I understand how it appears, I continued. I understand the concern. What I don't believe is that appearance alone is sufficient to determine capacity. The judge watched me. Not amused. Not convinced. Attentive. Then help the court understand, he said. Context, I said, changes everything. I glanced briefly at the monitor. The image was still there. Me in an apron carrying coffee like that was the most important thing I'd ever done. It wasn't wrong. Just wasn't complete. My parents dropped me off at my grandfather's house when I was 8 years old. They called it an opportunity. What it meant was simpler. No one laughed at that. I didn't look at my father. My grandfather didn't ask how I felt, I continued. He asked one question. Is this permanent? The judge's pen stopped. They said no. It wasn't supposed to be. I let that settle. It was. Colonel James Whitaker believed in 3 things: discipline, accountability, and earning your place in any room you enter. He gave me a schedule the first night. Wake up at 5:30. Bed made by 5:35. Reading by 6:30. I thought it was extreme. He told me I wanted structure. I just didn't know it yet. There was no yelling in his house. No punishment in the way most people understand it. Just consequences. If I complained, he asked me one question. Is it illegal? That was his standard. Not whether something felt fair. Whether it met the law. By the time I was 12, I understood the difference between fairness and legality. By 14, I was reading basic contract law. When I was 16, I overheard a conversation in his office. My parents were asking him for early access to part of his investment portfolio. I let my eyes drift briefly toward my father. He refused. He told them inheritance is not entitlement. It's responsibility. The judge tapped his pen. And your professional background, Miss Whitaker? After high school, I said I studied law. After graduation, I entered the United States Army. That landed differently. A few people sat up straighter. I completed officer candidate school, I continued, then advanced my legal training through military channels. The judge's eyes narrowed, focusing. And your current status? I met his gaze evenly. Active duty, Your Honor. The room went quiet. Not the kind of quiet that follows a joke. The kind that follows information no one expected. My father's attorney stepped forward quickly. Your Honor, while we respect the respondent's service, the issue before the court is estate management, not military background. It is relevant, I said calmly. The judge held up a hand. Let her finish. I nodded. My current assignment places me in a transitional period between postings. The work you see in those photographs is part-time, temporary, and lawful. During this period, I am subject to compliance procedures related to financial oversight, given the size of the estate and my active duty status. Those procedures restrict direct management of certain assets until review is complete. The attorney opened his mouth, then closed it. So instead of sitting idle, I said I chose to work. 3 shifts a week. Cleaning tables. Serving coffee. I looked back at the screen. It is not illegal. And it does not reflect my full professional capacity. The judge folded his hands. Miss Whitaker, do you have documentation supporting your statements? Yes, Your Honor. Then we will review it. But understand, this court must evaluate not just credentials but judgment. I nodded once. Judgment. It was always the last word they reached for when the facts alone weren't enough. My grandfather used to say it plainly. If someone is going to underestimate you, let them do it completely. They'll argue their own case for you. I rested my hand flat on the folder. I'm ready to present my documentation, Your Honor. And this time when I stepped forward, I wasn't closing distance. I was taking control of it. Before I submit documentation, I said, I'd like to address the evidence presented. The judge nodded. The photographs shown to this court are accurate. They depict me working at a cafe over a 3-week period. And the conclusion drawn from them is that I lack the capacity to manage my grandfather's estate. That conclusion is incomplete. The attorney stepped forward just enough, waiting for me to overreach. I didn't. The court has been presented with a pattern, I said. Regular employment, routine shifts, a consistent narrative. What has not been presented is the method used to construct it. The judge leaned forward. Explain. The images were taken over a defined 3-week window, mornings and early afternoons. Never evenings. Those time windows align with my off-duty hours during my transitional period. No surveillance was conducted outside them. The judge's pen stopped. You're suggesting selective documentation. I'm stating a fact. My father's attorney stepped in. Your Honor, the respondent is speculating about investigative methods. I'm describing observable gaps. The judge raised a hand. Let her finish. That was the second time. If the goal was to assess my full professional capacity, I said, the investigation would have extended beyond 3 weeks. It would have included verification of credentials, employment history, and licensing. I let my gaze settle briefly on the attorney. It did not. He looked away first. Instead, the court has been presented with a curated set of images designed to support a specific conclusion. That I am a waitress. The word didn't carry weight the way it had before. Not anymore. I opened the folder. The sound was small, but in that room it carried. Exhibit A, I said. My active duty orders. United States Army. The bailiff passed it to the bench. The judge read slowly. Exhibit B. My legal certification. Bar admission. The attorney shifted. Exhibit C. Current assignment designation. The judge's expression didn't change dramatically. The change was in his pace. Slower. More deliberate. Less assumption. Your Honor, the attorney said carefully. We do not dispute that the respondent may have additional qualifications. Our concern remains her current pattern. Pattern, I said quietly. He stopped. That's the word we keep returning to. A pattern constructed from a narrow set of observations. The judge looked up. And your explanation for this pattern? It's incomplete. That was it. No elaboration. Just the correction. My father shifted behind me. The first sign that the version of the story he had relied on was beginning to loosen. Your Honor, I said. I understand this court's responsibility to ensure my grandfather's estate is managed competently. I share that responsibility. This is not about pride or perception. I rested my hand on the remaining documents. It's about accuracy. The judge nodded once. Not agreement. Acknowledgement. Continue. My grandfather did not make impulsive decisions, I said. He evaluated. He verified. He tested. He did not leave me his estate because I asked for it. He left it because I met his standards. The judge placed his pen down. Counsel, he said. Approach. The attorney stepped forward. Voice low, but not low enough. We will need to revisit the basis of your argument. The case hadn't ended, but the version of it they had walked in with had. The second hearing felt like a correction. Same room, same bench, same case number. But the energy had changed into something quieter and more precise. Fewer people in the gallery. No neighbors leaning forward. No distant relatives with sudden opinions. Just attorneys, a clerk, the bailiff, and my father. No one was smiling. The judge entered without ceremony. He sat, adjusted the file, and spoke without preamble. This court has reviewed the additional materials submitted. Counsel, you may proceed. The attorney stood. Slower than before. Your Honor, we acknowledge the respondent's military service and legal qualifications. Our concern remains whether the decedent's decision was fully informed, given the demands of managing an estate in conjunction with active duty service. The language had softened. Influence had replaced incapacity. It was a smaller target and a more survivable one. The judge turned to me. I stood. What the court is being asked to consider, I said, is whether my grandfather made a decision he didn't understand. I let that settle. Colonel James Whitaker served 31 years in the United States Army. He managed personnel, resources, and budgets that exceeded anything in this room. He reviewed his estate annually. Every asset. Every allocation. He knew exactly what he was doing. Do you have documentation of those reviews? The judge asked. Yes, Your Honor. Already part of the submitted exhibits. He nodded. The attorney tried again. Your Honor, even if we accept the decedent's awareness, the respondent's current circumstances are governed by regulation. As I stated, I said. He stopped. The judge looked between us. Clarify. My current assignment, I continued, places temporary limitations on direct asset management. Those limitations are documented, lawful, and designed to prevent conflict of interest. They do not indicate incapacity. The attorney opened his mouth, closed it again. There was nowhere left for that argument to go. The judge leaned back. This court, he said, is not in the business of rewriting wills based on speculation. The word landed clean. You have not demonstrated undue influence. You have not demonstrated incapacity. And you have not demonstrated mismanagement. 3 lines. 3 closures. The attorney nodded once slowly. The judge turned to me. Miss Whitaker, the petition to appoint a temporary administrator is denied. The estate will remain under your authority, subject to the existing regulatory framework. I nodded once. Thank you, Your Honor. He made a final note. Close the file. This matter is concluded. The gavel came down softly. It didn't need force. It was already final. The room emptied the way it had filled. Quietly. I didn't move right away. I waited until the clerk finished, until the bailiff stepped aside, until the last attorney walked through the door. Then I turned. My father was still there. We stood across from each other. Same distance as the first hearing. Different context. You didn't have to do this, he said. Not angry. Just stated. I considered that. I didn't, I said. I held his gaze. You did. No accusation. No emphasis. Just alignment. He looked at me for a moment longer, the way someone looks when they're searching for something that would make the outcome make sense. Then he nodded once. Not agreement. Acknowledgement. And walked out. I watched him go without calling after him. Without adding anything that didn't need to be said. Outside, the air felt different. Not lighter. Clearer. I stood on the steps for a moment. Cars passing. Doors opening. People moving through their own versions of the day. Completely unaware of what had just happened inside that building. That's the thing about moments like this. They feel enormous when you're inside them. And invisible when you're not. I pulled out my phone. There was a message from my unit. Assignment details. New location. New responsibilities already waiting. I read it once. Locked the screen. My grandfather used to say the same thing every time something ended. Good. Now what's next? I stepped down from the courthouse steps and into the street. Not faster. Not slower. Just forward. Because that's all any of this ever was. Not revenge. Not performance. Just correction. And continuation. If you've ever been underestimated, if someone decided who you were before you had the chance to speak, I want to know what you did next. Did you argue? Did you walk away? Or did you wait for the right moment and let the truth do the work for you? Leave a comment. Tell me where you're watching from. Stories like this aren't rare. They're just rarely told all the way through. And if this one meant something to you, there are more waiting. Subscribe.